Hello and welcome to an episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason, and this episode is focused on Zanesville, or the historic National Road in Zanesville, Ohio. And I'm just about 4 or 5 miles west of town. But before I go to Zanesville, I'm going to check out these two places that played a huge part on the National Road. And one of them is the Headley Inn, the other one being the Smith family farm. And there's markers. I talk about it, and then I'll head into town and I'll show you some more stuff as part of Zanesville, Ohio. So come with me, I'll gladly take you along. All right, so that over there is the Headley Inn, and now it's a winery and vineyard. And there's a mile marker over there, I'll show you that too. And then these are 2 markers put up by the Ohio National Road Association. And then that over there is the legendary Smith House and Farm. I'm going to focus on the Headley Inn first, so here we go. One of the most beautiful and interesting of the old stopping places is the Headley Inn, which provided lodging and refreshment for the westward tide of migration for 30 years. The Headley Inn dreamed half a century away over rooms stored with fragrant apples and cider and huge heaps of wool. When people came back to highways and motor cars, the Headley Inn was restored to its original use and became famous along Route 40, the National Road, for its food and lodging. The Headley Inn was made famous nationally when pictured in one of the great mural paintings in the State of Ohio exhibit at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. Huh, that's interesting. So the 9-room Headley Inn was built in 1802 and was enlarged in 1833 with a 2-story addition on its east side. The stone walls are constructed of huge blocks of dressed sandstone. The original building consisted of a large basement kitchen built into the slope of a hill, plus 3 rooms opening into a porch. After the National Road was built, Uzal Headley enlarged his house to accommodate the traveling public. He began to operate the inn and secured a tavern license on April 28, 1834. The date stone in the inn's addition reads 1835. The east room on the ground level was the bar room, furthest from the living quarters. But when railroads were developed, tavern keeping on the stagecoach roads became unprofitable, and traffic along the old highways ceased. The little towns that had been so prosperous, otherwise known as pie towns, went to sleep, and inns were closed, either converted into dwellings or destroyed. Here's some old photos of the inn. I'll get out of the sun there. It's got a little nice creek between the two places. And so yes, again, this is the Headley House, or the Headley Inn now. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. And even though it says I'm being watched, I mean, I'll do my best. I know I'm technically trespassing, but why do they have these markers out here? Very cool. And there's a mile marker up there. All right, so Cumberland is 209 miles. Columbus is 48.5 miles. And then Wheeling is 79 miles. Zanesville is 5. Okay. And now the Smith House and Farm. Edward Essen Smith was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and arrived in Muskingum County, which is this, about the same time as his neighbor Uzal Headley. Smith was a farmer who built a log house near the site, and after the National Road reached Zanesville in 1829, began building a 7-room sandstone tavern, the right half of the present building, which he completed in 1830. The sandstone was quarried from a nearby cliff, resulting in the house sometimes being referred to as Cliff Rock House. While the nearby Headley Inn served as an inn and tavern, the Smith House more than offered its hospitality to drovers. Drovers were those driving livestock on the hoof to market, and teamsters hauling cargo and constabulary wagons. And I'll take you up to that building in a minute, but yes, it was a popular stopover for those travelers in the National Road. So, that's an old retro one. And that is what it looks like as of April 16th, 2024. It's got the National Register of Historic Places sign, and today it's a handcrafts place. Stores in the rear, but this is a classroom, actually, as it says on that sign. But either way, very thrilling to be in a front of a cool building. All right, now I'm going to take you uptown. Here we go. And now going into town, this is the Nelson T. Gant House, established in the 1850s. And to be honest, I do not know if they have tours of it, or you do it by appointment, or if there is a, what do you call it, a tenant here. But there are two markers here, and the house looks exactly as it probably did in the 1850s, or 100 years ago. Now this one was put up by the Ohio National Road Association, and unfortunately it's very faded. Yeah, probably because of the sun or for various reasons. But there is one that was put up by the Ohio Department of Transportation. So it's a little long, but just kind of bear with me, because this is a very interesting story and a very inspirational one as well. But Nelson T. Gant was one of Zanesville's most prominent African-American citizens. Born to slavery on the Woodburn estate of John Nixon of Loudoun County, Virginia, on May 10, 1821, Nelson was given his freedom by the provisions of his master's will in September 1845. However, Gant's wife, Anna Marie Hughes, remained the property of Miss C.A.E. Jane Russell of Leesburg, who refused to release her from bondage. 12 months after receiving his freedom, Nelson crossed the Ohio River and eventually arrived in Zanesville. Abolitionists in Putnam and friends in Virginia collected enough money to help Gant buy his wife's freedom in February 1847. The Gants made Zanesville their permanent home in 1850. Gant worked for Theodore Converse, during which time he bought this land for his home and farm. After Converse died, Gant made his living as a farmer and gardener of specialty vegetables. Although Nelson was a quiet man, oral tradition claims that he often hid slaves in his vegetable wagon to assist them from one safe house to another, and there's more on the other side. Nelson was quite industrious. He even sold fine strawberries and cream from the front porch of this homestead. Perhaps as homage to the brick buildings of his old home in Loudoun, Nelson built this house of brick, including the interior walls. Gant also owned a salt lick and a coal mine that produced the largest amount of coal purchased in Muskingum County at the time. A true entrepreneur, he would often dam the river and make ice blocks that he would sell. By hard work and thrift, he saved money and invested it in land. Ultimately, he became the owner of more than 300 acres and was a self-made millionaire. That's right. In the old slave tradition, Nelson would host community picnics on July 5th in Gant's Grove, which he later sold to Townsend Brick to make it into a public park, one of the first integrated parks in the state. The Municipal Stadium now stands on the grounds that used to be Gant Park. Nelson T. Gant died July 14th, 1905, as a well-respected citizen and a millionaire. And again, the Freedom of Society, the Friends of Freedom Society, and the Ohio Underground Railroad Association. Now, back in the last part of Columbus, Ohio, when I was there, the last marker I read off was about the Underground Railroad. All right, so it says, "Thank you, Gant House," and there's a number. I'm assuming that's the number to call for tours. 740-891-4838. I'll definitely look it up when I get home. But now I'm gonna go into town and check out the Y Bridge. Yep, I'll see you there. All right, so just not too far from the house, I thought I'd show you what the Gant Park Municipal Stadium looks like, and unfortunately I can't go behind the fence, but yeah, it looks pretty big. Nobody here, but very interesting. This was where he held events here, but I'm glad they're remembering his name. All right, now we are at the Y Bridge. Well, not too far from it. I mean, you can see it, but unfortunately you can't see the Y portion. Well, definitely not from where I'm standing, but there is a marker here. And so here's a little short story about it. On November 16th, 1814, the local newspaper reported, "Muskingum and Licking Bridge, this grand and important work is now passable. Great credit is due to Mr. Rufus Scott, the architect. Now the south and north sides of Licking Creek were joined with Zanesville on the east side of the Muskingum River. This uncovered toll bridge was the first of 5 generations of Y bridges that served as an important transportation link unique to the national road in Ohio. The second bridge was constructed in 1819 after the collapse of the original bridge. While designed to carry greater loads, the new structure only survived 13 years. Wear and damage from a winter flood made the bridge unsafe to carry the increased traffic that would soon pour across Ohio on the national road. The third generation Y bridge, built in 1832, carried travelers for 68 years. The fourth generation bridge was constructed in 1902. Heavily damaged in the flood of 1913, it was repaired and remained in service until 1979, when it was replaced by the bridge you see today. So that is a Y bridge. Here, let me get out of the sun. And now I'm going to go ahead and get up closer to the bridge. Wow, look at the river. Very flowing nicely. The Ohio historical marker, it says the Y Bridge, 1902, the world famous part of the old National Road. That marker was put up by the Ohio Historical Society in 1974. And then there's another marker, I mean it was placed by somebody else, but it says that this bridge was rebuilt in 1984. Since there's no traffic coming that direction, I might as well show you. Okay, yeah, that's that marker. But then that is not part of the Y bridge, that is a railroad bridge. But see, okay, why? Yeah, no, it's something you don't see every day, at least not from where I'm come from. But I'm looking at this river and I'm like, man, okay. It's got like a little waterfall there. And finally, this is Main Street of Zanesville. I'm going to go ahead and show you some history about this town, because I'm not going to leave this town without giving you some history of this town. Like, did you know that this was Ohio's second state capital? So here's a little brief timeline. I'm not going to read all of them. But 1800, William Green opens the first tavern in what is now Zanesville. It receives its name a year later from a government official. It was formerly known as Westbourne. From 1810 to 1812, Zanesville is the capital of Ohio. It was eventually moved to Columbus, as we all know. 1817, President James Monroe stays at a tavern on the corners of 5th and Main Street. Oh, so that would be just, yeah, right there probably. Yep. Yeah, James Monroe stayed at one of those places. Jumping to 1830, Zanesville becomes part of the National Road. 1877, Muskingum County Courthouse opens. Still looks in mighty fine shape, wouldn't you say? Look how detailed that is on top. I mean, not just the clock, but I'm talking about like all those pillars and all that. All right, City Hospital begins on 5th Street. Zanesville's worst flood reaches as far as 6th Street in 1913. The movies came to Zanesville in 1906. And then the Veterans Memorial Bridge is built in 1974. And then here's a little bit more about Zanesville. I'm not going to read the whole thing, don't worry. But it was named for Colonel Ebenezer Zane. In 1796, Congress commissioned Zane to build a road from Wheeling, Virginia, later West Virginia, to Limestone, Kentucky, which is present-day Maysville, Kentucky. So he went ahead and built that road, which drifted away from the National Road. And then the road became Zane's Trace. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason in downtown Zanesville, Ohio, on the historic National Road. All right, I'll see you guys in the next Ohio town on the National Pike. Sign off.